Welcome back to Ramsland. Today's lesson is to help you find the least common multiple so that you can use this to find common denominators when you're adding or subtracting fractions, or determine common denominators when you're adding or subtracting mixed numbers. So what I'd like to do is just start out with finding the least common multiple and just talking about how to find common multiples before we begin looking at fractions. And so I find this first example pretty easy to follow. It starts out by asking you what the multiples of 3 are. So what some people forget is your first multiple of a number is that number times 1. So the first multiple of 3 is simply 3. And then you would have 3 times 2 is 6. And then 3 times 3 is 9. 3 times 4 is 12, 15, 18, 21, and 24, and 27. And then you're looking at the multiples of 4, and then we find the least common multiple between the two. So again, the first multiple of 4 is 4 times 1, or simply 4. 4 times 2 is 8, and then 12. 4 times 4 is 16, then 20, 24, and 28. And then finally, you'd say, what are the common multiples of 3 and 4? So what a lot of people don't understand is when you're finding least common multiple, there's more than one common multiple. You're just looking for the one that comes first, okay? So our common multiples between 3 and 4, I see that both share 24. That's a common multiple between both of them. So I definitely write down 24. But there's also another one. There's 12. I know 4 times 3 is 12, but I also know 3 times 4 is 12. So I have two common multiples, 24 and 12. The least common multiple is the first one. So you'd say it's 12. So if I was trying to add a fraction that had uncommon denominators, and I had like 1/3.
You have reached the maximum time permitted to record. To send your message, press 1 at any time. To listen to your message, press 2. To re-record, press 3. For more options, press 4. To cancel, press star.
Hang on just a minute.
To send your message, press 1 at any time. To listen to your message, press 2. To re-record, press 3. For more options, press 4. To cancel, press star.
There we go. Make sure that when you join the meeting that you're on mute so that we don't hear you, because a lot of people are trying to actually listen to this lesson right now. And we'll have a chance for you guys to ask questions. But during the actual lesson, make sure that you stay on mute. Otherwise, it's really distracting for other people. And I think that you can see why. So let's go back to our lesson really quick. So if I was adding fractions and I had 3 and 4 as denominators, of course, they're not common. So I'd use least common multiple. So I would do 4 times 3 is 12. And if I do that to the denominator, then you do the same thing to the numerator. So this would become 4 over 12, which is the same as 1/3 or 33 cents. Then I'd want to change this to 12. And I'd do 4 times 3 is 12. Then I'd do the same thing to the numerator. 1 times 3 is 3. And then you'd simply add 4 plus 3 is 7 over 12. And so the impetus for learning least common multiple is so you can add and subtract fractions or mixed numbers that don't have common denominators. So let's look at this next one. I have the numbers 2 and 7. So if I was to find the multiples for 2 and 7, I'd start out by multiplying times 1. 1 times 2 is 2. 1 times 7 is 7. Then 2 times 2 is 4. 2 times 7 is 14. Then 3 times 2 is 6. 3 times 7 is 21. And I'd look and I still don't have a common multiple until you eventually get to 2 times 7 is 14 and 7 times 2 is 14. So for this one, it would be 14. For 4 and 10, I would go through my multiples of 4. So I have 4, 8, 12, 16, 20. For my multiples of 10, I have 10, 20, 30, 40. Now, 20 and 40 are shared multiples of 4 and 10, but 20 comes first. That's why it's the least common multiple. So I would write 20 there. In the same sense, for 4 and 5, I would think about what are my multiples for 4 and 5? Well, I have 4, 8, 12, 16, 20. And for 5, I have 5, 10, 15, 20. 20 is the first one that's the same. That's my least common multiple. In the same sense, I have 6 and 10. If I listed my multiples for 6, I'd have 6, 12, 18, 24, 30. And for 10, I'd have 10, 20, 30. 30 is my first one. That's my least common multiple. So I'd write down 30. For 4 and 12, sometimes one of the numbers is the least common multiple. So that's why it's important to remember that 12 is the first multiple of 12, 12 times 1. And then for 4, we'd have 4, 8, and then 12. So for this example, the least common multiple actually is 12. And over here, I have 6 and 18. And again, this is just like the last one. 18 is a multiple of 6. I have 6, 12, 18, 24. And 18 times 1 is a multiple of 18. So I'd write down 18. So some of these are, pretty easy samples of least common multiple. I'm just going to come back to you at this time. Any questions so far? We doing okay? Let's look at another few examples. It looks like I've got a few of you here today. I see Zakia, Petrina. I see Heidi. It's good to see all of you guys. I'm glad that you're joining us for this lesson. Let's look at a few more examples for least common multiple. I have 9 and 15. Okay, so if I did my multiples of 9, I would have 9 times 1, 9 times 2 is 18, 9 times 3 is 27, 9 times 4 is 36, and 9 times 5 is 45. And then if I did my multiples of 15, I know 15 times 2 is 30, 15 times 3 is 45. Now, I'm not going to go any further than this because I already have a match. I have a 45 up here, and I also have a 45 down here. So that first multiple that's the same, that's the least common multiple. So for 9 and 15, I'd say it's 45. Okay? For 4 and 8, this is an easy one because, again, 8 is a multiple of 4. 4 times 2 is 8. So if I did that same graphic example here, this is 4 times 1, 8 times 1. Is 4 times 2 is 8. 8 times 2 is 16. I wouldn't go any further because I already have a match. I have this 8. So I'd say that's my least common multiple. Here I have 3 and 18. Always ask yourself, is one of the numbers a multiple of the other number? So if you know that 3 times 6 is 18, and 18 times 1 is 18, then your least common multiple is 18. Now this one isn't quite that easy because there's nothing times 6 that equals 22. So you're going to have to do a few multiples here, okay? So if I had 22 over here, 22 times 2 is 44. 22 times 3 is 66. And really quickly for 6, I know 6 times 11 is going to equal 66. So for this one, I know 6 doesn't fit into 22. 6 is not a factor of 44, but 6 is a factor of 66. I know 6 times 11 is 66. And so I'm going to put 66 here. And here's 9 and 21. I know my multiples of 9. 9 times 2 is 18. 9 times 3 is 27. 9 times 4 is 36. 9 times 5 is 45. 9 times 6 is 54. Let's look at 21. 21 times 2 is going to be 42. 21 times 3 is going to be 63. 21 times 4 is going to be 84. 21 times 5 is going to be 105. And I'm looking for that common multiple between 9 and 21. Have I found it yet? I have 18. I have 42. 27. Do I have a 27 down here? No. Do I have a 45 down here? No. I know that 9 times 10 is going to be 90. That's nowhere near 105. Let's go 21 times 21 plus 105 is going to be 126. Do I have a match yet? Let's see, does 9 go into 126? Yes, it does. So 126 is going to be my common multiple there. That's 9 times 14. So if I'm looking at 2 and 3, this one you don't have to carry out very far. I know 2 times 3, 2 times 2 is 4, and 2 times 3 is 6, and I know 3 times 2 is 6. And so very quickly, I have a match for that one. My answer would be 6. If I'm looking at 14 and 4, and I carry this out, of course, I'd have 4 times 2 is 8, and 14 times 2 is 28. And pretty quickly, you know that 4 times a number is going to be 28. Let's find out which number that is. So 4 times 3 is 12. 4 times 4 is 16. Times 5 is 20. Times 6 is 24. There it is, times 27. Times 7 is 28. And so that's our first match. 4 times 7 is 28. And of course, 14 times 2 is 28. So I'd write 28 here. Here's an easy one because 25 is a multiple of 5. And so I'm going to write 5 there. For 7 and 6, here's a shortcut. If one number is prime and the other number is not a factor of that number, like 7 is a prime number. If 6 is not a factor of 7, 6 doesn't fit into 7, then the shortcut is just to multiply these two. Just 7 times 6 is 42. Or you could do it the long way and do 6 times 2 is 12, 18, 24, 30, 42 until you eventually get to 42. But I always find the shortcut is if one number is prime, the other number is not a factor of that number, they just multiply the two of them by each other and you get the least common multiple. For 12 and 20, if you'd carry this out, you'd have to carry this all the way out until you'd get 60. So for 20, I have 20, 40, 60. And then for 12, I know 12 times 5 is 60. So I have 12 times 2 is 24, and I have 36, and I have 48, and eventually I'd get 60. So your least common multiple there is going to be 60. Okay? Okay, so I want to come back to you and unmute you and just see, is there anyone that has any questions about least common multiple at this point? We're doing okay with least common multiple? Okay. I want to go on then and use least common multiple to add and subtract fractions that don't have common denominators, or adding and subtracting mixed numbers that don't have common denominators. So let's take a look at a few of those. This first one is just fractions, okay? So I have 4 and 16. So I'm still doing lowest common multiple. Here's 4, here's 16. I want these two numbers to be the same, okay? So this is 16 times 1, this is 4 times 1. 4 times 2 is 8, times 3 is 12, times 4 is 16. I'm not going to do any multiples of 16 because I already have it. 16 times 1 and 4 times 4. So I'm going to change both of these to 16. I know 16 times 1 is 16. Do the same thing at the top. So the fraction's equivalent. So this stays the same, 1 over 16. This one's going to look a little bit different, but it's still going to be 75 cents. It's still going to be equivalent. Remember, equivalent means equal to. So if I multiply the denominator by the same number that I multiply the numerator, the fraction's equivalent. It'll still be 75 cents. So if I did 4 times 4 here, then I have to do 4 times 4 up here for the numerator. So 4 times 3 is going to be 12. So 12 over 16, if I reduce it, it becomes 3/4. It's still 75 cents. And when your denominators are the same, you can add. So 12 plus 1 is going to be 13 over 16. Okay, and I just want to pause for a minute here because we still have some people that need to make sure they mute their mic during their lesson. So if you have not muted your microphone, you just want to click on that and just make sure that it's muted. Otherwise, we hear whatever's going on in the background, and people that really want to watch this lesson or parents who want to go back and watch the recording, they can't hear because they hear whatever's going on in the background at your house. And you don't want to do that to families that are actually trying to use this as a means to better their child's math scores. So let's go back to our lesson one more time. I'm looking at 5 and 10. So again, I'm looking, what is the least common multiple between 5 and 10? So this is 10 times 1, 5 times 1. 5 times 2 is 10. 10 times 2 is 20. This is your least common multiple. It's also going to be your common denominator. Now, if one of your fractions already has a 10, don't change that fraction. Just change the one that doesn't have that. So this is going to change to 2 times 5 is 10. Do the same thing to the numerator so it's equivalent. So 2 times 2 is going to be 4. 2 times 5 is 10. And then just rewrite this fraction, 1 over 10. And then add your numerators. 4 plus 1 is 5. And the denominator stays the same. Now, if you look at your directions, it says write it in lowest terms. This means to simplify it. So this gets back to the other day's lesson on greatest common factor. You're looking at the highest number that's a common factor for 5 and 10, which of course would be 5. So if I divide 5 by 5, I'd get 1. If I divide 10 by 5, I'd get 2. So your answer to this would be 1/2. Let's look at 25 cents plus 50 cents. We know that should be 75 cents or 3/4. How do we get there? Well, you have to find the least common multiple between 4 and 2, which is going to be 4, because I know 2 times 2 is 4. So I'm going to change this fraction by multiplying the bottom and the top by 2. Okay, so this is going to equal 1/4 plus 2 times 1 is 2, and 2 times 2 is 4. Now I have my common denominator, which is also my least common multiple. I have 1 plus 2 is 3. The bottom stays 4. And that's your answer. Let's scroll down and look at a couple more here. Okay, I have 14 and 3. So here's the shortcut for least common multiple. Remember, if one number is prime and it's not a factor of the other number, multiply them by each other. So in this case, 3 is prime. It's divisible only by 1 in itself. It is not a factor of 14. It doesn't fit into 14. So just do 3 times 14 is 42. And that is your least common multiple and your common denominator for both fractions. So this one, you have to change both of them. Okay? So if I did 3 times 14 here, I'd get 42. Do the same thing to the numerator so it's equivalent. 1 times 14 is 14. So this is 33 cents, and this is also 33 cents. If you type 14 divided by 32, you're going to get 0.33333. Now I'm going to do the same thing over to this fraction. I have to do 3 times 14 to equal 42. Do the same thing to the numerator. 3 times 3 is 9. Now I'm ready to add my numerators. So I have 14 plus 9 is 23 over 42. And this is reduced because 23 is prime. 23 is not a factor of 42. You can't divide 42 evenly by 23. And so that is your answer for that question. All right, let's look at number 6. This is kind of like the last one, because 2 is prime. It's divisible only by 1 in itself. It is not a factor of 19. So to find the least common multiple, multiply them by each other. 2 times 9. So if I multiply 2 times 9, I have to change both of these fractions. And I know that 2 times 9 is going to be 38 for both of these. So this becomes 38, and this becomes 38. So 2 times 19 is 38. I have to do the same thing to the numerator. 2 times 1 is 2. 2 times 19 is 38. I have to do the same thing to the numerator. 1 times 19 is 19. Okay, now that my denominators are the same, I'm ready to add my numerators. 2 plus 19, I'm going to get 21 over 38. And 21 is not prime. The factors of 21 are 21, 1, 3, and 7. But 3 is not a factor of 38. 7 is not a factor of 38. The only common factor between these two is 1. So that's when you know it's reduced. It's simplified, or it's in lowest terms. Here for number 10, I've got 2 and I have 16. Here again, this number is prime and it is a factor of 16. So if one number is prime and it is a factor of the other number, then the larger number is the least common multiple. So in this case, don't multiply them by each other. Just recognize that 2 fits into 16 evenly. So that's why this fraction doesn't change. It'd be like you multiplying 16 times 1 and 3 times 1. It doesn't change. This one does have to change. So I'm going to do 2 times 8 makes it into a 16. And 1 times 8 equals 8. And then I leave this fraction alone. It stays the same. And then I'm ready to add only my numerators. 3 plus 8 is 11 over 16. Is it reduced? How do I know it's simplified? 11 is prime. It's divisible only by 1 in itself. 11 is not a factor of 16. That's how I know it's simplified. Okay, let's scroll down here. This next one is a little bit easier because I already have common denominators. Both of them have 11 on the bottom. So in this one, I don't have to change anything. I already have the least common multiple. It's 11. So I'm just adding the numerators. 9 plus 1 is 10. Bottom stays 11. Now 10 is not prime, okay? But the factors of 10 are not factors of 11. My factors of 10 are 1, 2, 5, and 10. The only common factor of 10 and 11 is 1. So if the only number that'll divide both is 1, then you know it's reduced. If 1 is your only common factor. Okay, let's look at 6/19 and 2/3. Here again is my shortcut. 3 is prime. It's divisible by 1 in itself. It's not a factor of 19. So I just multiply these by each other. So I know 3 times 9 is 57. So I'm going to change both of these to 57. Okay. And then what I did to the denominator to make it into that least common multiple, I have to multiply the numerator by that same number. So if I had to multiply 3 times 19 to get 57 down here, then I have to do the same thing to the numerator so it's equivalent. So I know that 2 times 19 is 38. And then over here, I'm going to look at what did I have to do to this 19 to make it into a 57? Well, on this side, I multiplied by 3. So if I multiply the bottom by 3, I have to multiply the numerator by 3. So 3 times 19 is 57. 3 times 6 is 18. Okay, so now I'm ready to leave my denominator. It'll say 57, stays the same. And I just have to add my numerators. 38 plus 18 is going to be 48, 56. Okay, so 56 over 57, okay? This is your shortcut. 57 is a prime number, okay? If 56 is not a factor of 57, think about your factors of 56. I know that 7 times 8 is 56. 7 is not a factor of 57 because it's prime. 8 is not a factor of 57 because 57 is prime. And so you know your fraction is reduced. It's in lowest terms. For number 11, I have 2 11ths and a half, okay? So I'm thinking of 11 and 2. 2 is prime. It's not a factor of 11, so I'm just going to multiply them. 2 times 11 is 22. That's my least common multiple. It's my common denominator. So I have a 22 here, and I'm going to have a 22 over here. Then I go back, and I have to make my fractions equivalent so that they'll have a denominator of 22. So if I multiply 2 times 11 to get 22 on the bottom, then I have to multiply the numerator by the same number. So it still equals 50 cents, because right now I know 1/2 is 50 cents. So if I did a 1 times 11, I know that 11 over 22 is still 50 cents because 11 is half of 22. That's how I know these fractions are equivalent. And then over here, if I multiplied 11 times 2 to get 22, I have to do the same thing to the numerator. 2 times 2 is 4. Okay, so now my fractions are equivalent. I have common denominators. Now I'm ready to add the numerators. 4 plus 11 is 15. My denominator stays the same, 22. Is it reduced? How do I know? 15 is not prime, but the only factor it shares with 22 is 1. My factors of 15 is 1, 3, 5, and 15. So 15 is not a factor of 22. 5 isn't. 3 doesn't fit into 22. Only 1 is a factor of 15 and 22, so I know it's reduced. Okay, let's take a look at 1/3 plus 2/17. Okay, so I have 3 and 17. What's my shortcut? If one number is prime and it's not a factor of the other number, then I multiply them together. I just do 3 times 17, which I know is 51. So I'm going to change both denominators to 51. Okay, if I had to multiply this by 17, I have to do the same thing to the numerator so they're equivalent. Both of them have to equal 33 cents. So 17 times 1 is 17. And of course, 17 times 3 is 51. Then I look at my other fraction. What did I do to the 17 to make it into a 51? Well, I multiplied by 3. So if I do that to the denominator, I have to do it to the numerator. So 3 times 6, 2 is 6. And now you're ready to add your numerators. So 17 plus 6 is going to be 23 over 51. It's reduced because 23 is prime and 51 is prime, and 23 is not a factor of 51. So I'm done. Okay, for number 8, I've got 3 and 6, and I want to think about what my common denominator is going to be. What's my least common multiple? So if 3 is prime and it's a factor of 6, it fits into 6 evenly, then 6 is your least common multiple. It's your common denominator. So I'm just going to leave this one the same. It'd be like doing 1 times 1 and 6 times 1. I have to change this one, though. So 2 times 3 makes it into a 6. And I have to do the same thing to the numerator. 2 times 1 is 2. And then I'm going to change this one, not at all. It'd be like multiplying the top and bottom by 1. Okay? And then I'm ready just to add my numerators. 2 plus 1 is 3. The denominator stays the same. Now remember, if you get to this point and you look at your numerator and it's a factor of the denominator, then just divide the top and the bottom by that number. So 3 divided by 3 equals 1. 6 divided by 3 equals 2. And so your reduced answer would be 1/2 for number 8. Okay, and then the last one, number 12, I have the denominators 11 and 8. I want to determine what's the least common multiple. 11's prime. 8's not a factor of 11. So my shortcut is to multiply 8 times 11 is 88. So I'm going to change both of these to 88 for my least common multiple for my common denominator. So I know 8 times 11 is 88. I do the same thing to the numerator. 3 times 11 is 33. I know 8 times 11 is 88, so I do the same thing to the numerator on this side. 8 times 4 is 32. Now I'm ready to add my numerators. 32 plus 33 is going to be 65 over 88. How do I know this is reduced? Well, because 65 is only going to have multiples of 5, and 88 does not have factors of 5. 5 is not a factor of 88. So I know that this is reduced at this point. Okay, so I want to go back to you and just see how we're doing. How are we doing so far? Is everybody good? We're okay? Anybody have questions on any of those that we just did? Any of you doing okay? All right. I want to go on to looking at mixed numbers now that don't have common denominators, and we want to look at some of these questions that may need to be regrouped. Remember, when you regroup a mixed number, that means that your fraction from adding or subtracting mixed numbers is more than a whole, and you have to add it to the whole number that you determined. But when you add mixed numbers, you still have to have common denominators, which really are least common multiples of those two denominators. So let's take a look at this sample here. You had 3 over 5 and 2 over 6. 3 over 5 and 2 over 3. 5 and 3 are not common denominators. And so they decided your least common multiple is 15. If you see that in this sample, it's kind of small here. So they didn't change the whole numbers. The whole numbers stayed 2 and 6, but they changed the denominators so they could add. All right. So let's take a look at some of these together. And I'm going to make this a little bit larger because I think it's kind of small. That should make it a little bit easier to read. Okay. So for number 1 here, I have the denominators 5 and 10. I know 5 is prime, but it is a factor of 10. So I'm going to keep 10. That's my least common multiple. I'm only going to change the top one here. So I know 2 times 5 is 10. And I know 1 times 2 is 2. Okay. This is kind of a smaller sheet, so I'm going to use a smaller. Let's bring this down a little bit. Okay. Okay, and then, so 2 over 10 is equivalent to 1/5. So I'm just going to rewrite my whole number. So this is now 1 and 2/10, which is the same as 1 and 1/5, or $1.20 if you divide it out. This one doesn't change because it already has a 10 as a denominator. So I'm just going to rewrite 2 and 7/10. Okay, so this is $2.70, $1.20. And so I'm going to add my whole numbers first. 1 plus 2 is 3. 2 plus 7 is 9. And the bottom stays 10. Okay, so this is $3.90. It's reduced. 9 does not have any common factors other than 1 with 10. So I know that it's in lowest terms, 3 and 9/10. Okay, let's look at 2 and 1/8 and 1 and 1/4. Between 4 and 8, I have to find a least common multiple. 4 is not prime, but it is a factor of 8. 4 times 2 is 8. So I'm not going to change this top mixed number. I'm going to leave it exactly the way it is. I'm just going to change this part right here. 2 times 4 is going to equal 8. And 2 times 1 is going to equal 2. So this changes to 1 and 2/8 plus 2 and 1/8. So now I'm ready to add my mixed number because my denominators are the same. So 2 plus 1 is going to be 3. 1 plus 2 is 3. And the bottom stays 8. Okay? And I know that 3 is prime. 3 is not a factor of 8. And so this is simplified. It's in lowest terms. Okay, let's look at number 3 together. I have a 3 as a denominator here, and I have a 2 as a denominator over here. 2 is prime, 3 is prime. 2 is not a factor of 3, and so I'm just going to multiply them by each other to find the least common multiple. 2 times 3 is 6, so I have to change the denominator for both of these. So I know 2 times 3 is going to be 6, and I know 2 times 2 is 4. And I'm going to rewrite the whole number, okay? I know over here, 2 times 3 is 6, and 3 times 1 is 3. I'm going to rewrite the whole number. And you're going to find out that we have to regroup this mixed number. So I'm going to have 5 plus 2 is 7, and 4 plus 3 is 7, and the denominator stays 6. But I have to regroup this because I can't leave this mixed number with an improper fraction. 7/6. So if you remember the other day, the denominator is the divisor. It goes on the outside of the division box. And the numerator is the dividend. It goes inside the division box. 6 goes into 7 one whole time. That's an extra $1 that I have to add to the 7. So 1 times 6 is 6. There's 1 left over. The remainder becomes the numerator. The denominator stays the same. So this 1, the 6 went into 7. This 1 has to add to this 7. I regroup it. So this becomes $8. There was 1 left over, and the denominator stays the same. So this would change from 7 and 7/6 to 8 and 1/6. And that's how you regroup mixed numbers with addition. Okay, let's look at number 4. I have 10 and 5. 5 is prime, and it is a factor of 10. So 10 is going to be my least common multiple between 10 and 5. It is my common denominator. So this top number, we're not going to change. I'm just going to leave it as 4 and 3/10. This bottom number, I have to multiply 2 times 5 to get 10. Then I have to do the same thing, so it's equivalent. 2 times 1 is 2. My whole number is 2. Now I'm ready to add my whole numbers. 4 plus 2 is 6. 3 plus 2 is 5. And the bottom stays 10. But I have to simplify this mixed number because 5/10 is not reduced. 5 is a factor of 10. So I'm going to divide the top and bottom by 5. So my whole number stays the same. 5 divided by 5 is 1. 10 divided by 5 is 2. So my reduced mixed number would be 6 and 1/2. Okay. Okay, let's scroll down here a little bit. And let's look at 3 and 5/6 and 1 and 1/3. Again, in this example, I know that 3 is a factor of 6. I know 3 times 2 is 6. So I'm going to keep this top fraction the same, but this 1/3 I have to change. So it has a 6 on the bottom. So 2 times 3 is 6, and 2 times 1 is 2. And my whole number stays the same. Okay? Now I'm going to add my whole numbers. 3 plus 1 is 4. 5 plus 2 is 7. And the bottom stays the same. Here again, I have to regroup because 7/6 is an improper fraction. The numerator should not be more than the denominator. If it is, you have to divide, okay? So remember, the bottom number, the denominator, that's the divisor. It goes on the outside of a division box. And the numerator is the dividend. It goes inside the box. So 6 fits into 7 one whole time. The quotient is a whole number. So whatever you get up here, you have to add to 4, okay? So 1 plus 4, now it's 5. Then I multiply and subtract. 6 times 1 is 6. And I have 1 left over from my original dividend of 7. Whatever's remaining here, that becomes your numerator. The denominator stays the same. So now 4 and 7 over 6 would be regrouped and be written as 5 and 1/6. And that's your answer for number 5. Okay, so number 6 here, I have 5 and a tenth, $5.10, and I have 4 and 7/20, okay, or $4.35. So what I want to do here is make sure between 10 and 20 I have the same denominator. So let's think about how we figure that out. I can do 10 times 2 is 20, and 20 times 1 is 20. So 20 is going to be your first common multiple between those two. That's why it's your common denominator. So I'm not going to change this mixed number down here, just the top. So I know 2 times 10 is going to be 20, and I know 2 times 1 is 2. So I have 2 over 20, and my whole number 5 stays the same. So 5 plus 4 is going to be 9. 2 plus 7 is 9. And my denominator stays 20. Now 9 is not prime, but none of the factors of 9 other than 1 are factors of 20. My factors of 9 are 9, 1, and 3. 9 is not a factor of 20. 3 is not a factor of 20. Only 1 is a common factor. And so I know by using greatest common factor that 9 over 20 is reduced. So I can stop right there. I don't have to regroup because 9 is smaller than 20. So as long as your numerator is smaller than your denominator, then it's not improper. You don't have to do anything to it. Let's look at number 7. I have 8 and 4. 4 isn't prime, but it is a factor of 8. I know 2 times 4 is 8. So 8 is going to be your least common multiple. Don't change this top mixed number. Just change this one. So I have 4 times 2 is 8, and I have 2 times 3 is 6. The whole number stays the same. Now I'm ready to add 2 plus 6, the whole numbers would be 8. The numerators, 3 plus 6 would be 9. And your denominator stays the same. I have to regroup. How do I know? Because my numerator, 9, is bigger than my denominator, 8. So now I have to divide 9/8. What does that look like? Okay, remember, 8's on the outside. That's the divisor. The numerator, 9, is the dividend. It's on the inside. So 8 fits into 9 one whole time. This is the quotient. It's also the whole number. So 1 plus 8, that's going to equal 9. 1 times 8 is 8. I subtract. My remainder, or my leftover dividend, becomes the numerator. This goes up here. My denominator, 8, stays the same. So 8 and 9/8 would be regrouped as 9 and 1/8. Okay, last one. Let's look at 9 and 1/5, $9.20, plus 4 and 1/4, $4.25. Between 5 and 4, I have to find my common denominator, my least common multiple. So I'm going to do my multiples of 4. I have 4, 8, 12, 16, 20. My multiples of 5 are 5, 10, 15, 20. My first common multiple is 20. That's your common denominator. So I have to change both of these. So 5 times 4, that's going to be 20. And 4 times 1 is going to be 4. My whole number stays the same. 4 times 5 is 20. And 1 times 5 is 5. And my whole number stays the same. Okay, now I'm ready to add 4 plus 9. My whole numbers first is 13. 4 plus 5, my numerators, is going to be 9. And my denominator stays the same. So let's look at that. 13 and 9 over 20. First of all, is 9 over 20 improper? No. 9 is less than 20. Second of all, do I have to reduce 9 over 20? Well, my factors of 9 are 9, 3, and 1. 3 is not a factor of 20. 9 is not a factor of 20. Only 1 is a common factor between 9 and 20. That's how you know it's reduced. It's in lowest terms. Okay, so let me come back to you. We just went over a few concepts. We just went over least common multiple. We just went over adding fractions with uncommon denominators. We just went over adding mixed numbers with uncommon denominators. We talked about reducing fractions. Is there anyone who has any questions over what we just did? Anybody at all? We good? Okay. All right. In that case, I'm going to give you guys a little bit of time just to visit with each other. And one of the things that we have to make sure that we maintain is when you're visiting with each other, when the time for this meeting is up, it's really important that you leave the meeting together, okay? You alone are responsible for what you do on social media and what you say on social media, not Wayne Township, not your teacher. We would encourage you to make sure that you use positive comments with each other, be kind to each other in your comments, okay? So at this time, I'm going to stop.